Hello, everyone. How are you doing tonight? Welcome, 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 welcome. How are you doing? How are you doing? So good to be here, still figuring out all this exciting new technological gear that I'm working with. Very, very exciting. Very exciting stuff. So I'm still figuring it all out. But overall, things seem to be going well. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell so you can get notified that we're having one of these streams. And yeah, here we are. Here we are with the new setup. I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, and we're going to do our stream. Now, we're using the same basic format pretty much, which is that I give my opening remarks. And while you're doing that, instead of writing down your super chat questions as I used to do, I am typing your super chat questions onto my laptop. And then I will proceed to read your super chat questions in the second half of the show and answer them. And we will do the roll call in the middle. So first, I give my opening remarks, which is then followed by the roll call, which is then followed by me answering your super chat questions for the rest of the night. And thanks for being here, folks. I gotta just be level with all of you. I gotta be honest. I have been more busy in this past week than I have been in quite a long time. A lot of things have come at me all at once. Stuff related to my job as a reporter, stuff related to my think tank, the Center for Political Innovation, stuff related to my family. I have just been hit in about 12 different directions, but that's okay. I'm still here and we're still streaming. We're going to be on Rockfin pretty soon. Fingers crossed. I did not anticipate my life getting a little bit overwhelming, but here I am. And we are just going to keep going because we have an important mission. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Always good to hit that notifications bell so you get notified the next time we do one of these. And we're just going to go right into our opening remarks. So, folks, the new Cuban Missile Crisis is continuing. The United States is pouring lethal weapons into Ukraine. And just today, we heard Joe Biden, the oh so popular Joe Biden, threaten to send U.S. troops to Ukraine. I don't know if you heard that right. But apparently, Joe Biden is threatening to send U.S. military personnel to Ukraine. And, we got lethal weapons pouring into the country, military helicopters, etc. And this is all premised around the idea that the United States says that Russia is planning to invade Ukraine. That's what they say, that Russia's planning to invade Ukraine. And so the United States is pouring military hardware into Ukraine. Russia has never said that they plan to invade Ukraine. All that Russia is doing is moving troops around inside of Russia within their own borders. Meanwhile, Russia has said that there are certain red lines. And one of those red lines is piling military hardware into Ukraine. And another one of those red lines would be Ukraine joining NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the NATO alliance. And it seems like the United States is trying to do its darndest to make their prediction come true. They want to force Russia into a situation where Russia has to respond. Russia has not yet been given an answer about the security guarantees they discussed with Joe Biden. They haven't been given an answer. Meanwhile, it seems like the NATO coalition is coming apart. The Germans have said there won't be any transporting of weapons through Germany headed for Ukraine. Bet you didn't know about that. And the head of the German Navy has said that he is at this point, he's not going to participate. He stepped down. Croatia has said they will quit the NATO coalition if there's a conflict with Russia. This is all big. Shout out to David Fox in the chat. And yes, Australians for a New Democracy has been formed. An important new think tank in Australia has just started. They just had a great stream tonight. Australians for a New Democracy. I am so excited about it. So great work, David Fox. Great work, Helen Woolley. Great work, many, many others out there in Australia. What we're doing here with the city building tendency and the Center for Political Innovation in the United States, this is excellent. And I am so excited about what's happening in Australia, what's happening in Britain with the Workers' Party, and there's so many good things happening. So excellent work, David. But we're in this situation where the escalation continues, and it keeps looking like it's going to de-escalate. We keep getting signs that it's going to de-escalate, but then when it looks like it's going to de-escalate, then we get Joe Biden. My jaw dropped seeing him on CNN today. He's in the clothing store. Did you see this? He's sitting in the clothing store. He's in the clothing store talking to reporters, rambling on. And he's saying, oh, yeah, we might send troops. We got troops on high alert, and we might send troops to Ukraine. I'm seeing this. I'm just shocked. Like, he's announcing, like, oh, yeah, we're on the brink of World War III while he's casually shopping in the afternoon. You ever talk about a let's go Brandon moment? That was a let's go Brandon moment if we ever saw one. But in addition to that, Joe Biden said something that was not true. He claims that Russia has 100,000 troops ready to invade Ukraine. Now, that's not true. Russia, may have troops within their own borders, but they don't, they've never said they're planning to invade Ukraine. But regardless, Joe Biden said that if Russia, these 100,000 troops he alleges Russia has that are supposedly about to invade Ukraine, according to Joe Biden, he says if they invade Ukraine and send in these 100,000 troops, that would be the biggest military invasion since the Second World War. The biggest invasion since the Second World War. That ain't true. Because in 2003, you will remember, the United States invaded Iraq. And when the United States invaded Iraq, they didn't just send 100,000 troops into Iraq. They sent 177,000 troops into Iraq. It was from the Coalition of the Willing, you'll remember, that George W. Bush built. And it was 130,000 U.S. troops, 177,000 troops overall. So this was not accurate, this statement that Joe Biden made. It's not mathematical fact. If Russia has 100,000 troops about to invade Ukraine, that is still not the biggest invasion since World War II. Some things are true, some things are not. The math doesn't add up. But regardless, Russia doesn't want to intervene in Ukraine, but the United States is continuing to pour lethal weapons and is continuing to threaten Russia. Russia has been promised that NATO would not expand further eastward. Now there's talk of bringing Ukraine into NATO. Russia has said they don't want lethal weapons in the hands of the Azov Battalion, these groups of Nazi collaborators who want to overthrow, want to destabilize and create chaos and are waging war against the people in the eastern regions. The USA is giving lethal weapons to those folks. So all the red lines are being crossed. Do you think the USA will ever do a large-scale invasion again? Think USA will ever do a large-scale invasion again? Wrote it down. All the red lines are being crossed. And of course, if Russia makes red lines and the United States crosses them, they're going to have to take action, or else their red lines won't mean anything. And so it seems like we're engaged in a game of chicken. You ever see the movie Rebel Without a Cause, starring James Dean? One of my all-time favorite movies. 1950s Hollywood movie starring James Dean. We know why the West ran from Afghanistan. Why the West ran from Afghanistan. All right, wrote it down. It's a movie starring James Dean, and it's about teenage rebels, leather jackets, smoking cigarettes, etc. Anyhow, in that movie, there's a scene where two teenage boys have a game called Chicken. And what they do is they both have cars. They both have cars. Both of them have cars. And they are driving their cars toward a cliff. Toward the cliff that faces the ocean. And the idea is the first guy to jump out of his car loses. Talk about a dangerous game. Talk about a dangerous game. Driving your cars towards the edge of a cliff, but the first guy to jump out loses. Right? We will see some more Bonapartism. All right. See more Bonapartism. All right, wrote it down. And thank you, Zachary Bunch, for the super chat. Much appreciated. And it's called Chicken, is the name of the game that they're playing, because the object is to outlast the other guy, to get as close to the edge of the cliff as you possibly can until the other guy gets nervous and jumps out of his car. And then you can stop your car. You don't have to go off the edge of the cliff. You won. That's the game. And that is the game U.S. imperialism is playing with Russia right now. They're racing towards the edge of a cliff called World War III. And they're saying, hey, Russia, will you jump out of the car first, or will we? That's what they're doing right now. They are playing a game of chicken. And it's utterly terrifying. Right? Does Anglo-American power still follow the geopolitical Mackinder heartland theory? I have no idea what that is, good sir. So I cannot comment on that because I don't know what it is, Bones Mode 99. But they're playing a game of chicken. The idea is that if the USA stands down first, the USA will look weak and Russia will look strong. If Russia stands down first, then Russia will look weak and the USA will look strong. And they're taking the whole world toward a cliff called World War III. This is not a proxy war, folks. Let's be clear. This is not a proxy war. If the U.S. military and the Russian military begin fighting each other in Ukraine, that is not a proxy war. That's not what's been happening in Syria. That's not what's been going on in different countries throughout the world. No. This would be a full-on confrontation between two great powers. It would be Russia fighting the United States. And that would be a disaster. Folks, war is not a gentlemanly sport. Okay? Some people say, well, okay, well, maybe we'll just agree that, we'll send our military into Ukraine to back up the Ukrainians. Russia will send their military to enforce their security guarantees or whatever, and it'll be only bullets, and it'll all stay in Ukraine. No, that is not how war works, folks. War is not a gentlemanly sport, right? War, you don't agree on the terms of the game beforehand. No. No, Russia and the United States both have nuclear weapons. This is a very, very serious situation. And I hate to sound a bit like a broken record, right? I wish this was, I could say, oh, now I want to talk about something else. Let's talk about bowling. Let's talk about some archaic speech that Lenin gave 100 years ago. But no, I mean, I hate to, this isn't a sitcom. This isn't entertainment, right? I'm telling you what's going on. And what is shocking to me is how one-sided our media is. During the 80s, there were a lot of situations like this. The Flight 007 incident, there were many times that there was some kind of spat between the USA and the Soviet Union that started to escalate and then de-escalated. And in US media, they made a point at that time of having two different voices. On the one hand, they'd have Ronald Reagan and the Republicans and Pentagon generals that'd be like, "Oh, those Russians are out of control, threatening our American way of life, and it's an evil empire, Nancy." They Ronald Reagan, it's an evil empire. Yeah, they would talk that way, and then you'd have a Democrat get on there, or you'd have somebody from the Institute for Policy Studies who would get on there and say, "Oh, give peace a chance. Can't we all just learn to get along? We're not all right. I mean, of course, the Soviet Union's bad, but there's some bad things America's done too. We had this war in Vietnam; it wasn't so good, so maybe we can just de-escalate the whole thing now, and then we can go back to no, an arms race." And there used to always be some like Jimmy Stewart liberal who was on there going, "Oh, gee, do we really want to have a third world war with Russia?" There was two sides. American media used to talk out of two sides of its mouth. In the 80s, when we were in one of these chicken confrontations and it was escalating, there would be two voices representing American imperialism. There would be, the general pounding his fist, and then there would be, some Jimmy Stewart sounding liberal, Walter Mondale, or I don't know, Walter Mondale, or Jimmy Carter, or Mike Dukakis, or one of them would be on there going, "Oh, now, we really want to escalate this thing here. Now, we don't want to do this." They had two sides of their mouth. There are not two sides of your mouth, right? Other than Tucker Carlson, I'll give you that. Tucker Carlson is the exception. He is the only one who seems to be Tucker Carlson and Tulsi Gabbard, who are only on Fox News. They're only on Fox, right? MSNBC doesn't give them the time of day. CNN doesn't give them the time of day. But other than Tucker Carlson, Tulsi Gabbard, other than that, it is this drumbeat. And it's like at no point do I hear, I mean, I turned on CNN today and I was shocked. At no point do I hear them even acknowledging the danger of this situation. Russia does not have a small military, folks. Russia's not Iraq. How can we better understand Xi Jinping's involvement at the World Economic Forum? Okay. Xi Jinping's involvement at the World Economic Forum. All right, and give us to the JBVs. You got it, Robert. So, this isn't a joke. This is a very serious situation. And CNN is not reminding people of that. It's utterly horrifying to me. No one's acknowledging how dangerous this situation is. And it's almost like they're psyching people up for it. The EU is an imperialist institution. Yes, Tommy Farras, I agree with you. I don't know why that got highlighted, but it did. But this is a very, very, very serious and a very, very dangerous situation. And I realize that. And you guys realize that as the base for Brzezinski's about Central Asia being key to global power. All right. We're going to talk about that. All right. Brzezinski's grand chessboard. Eurasia base for global power. All right. This is a really serious situation. And, we might as well, since this is a podcast or a YouTube stream for socialists and communists and Marxists and genuine anti-imperialists, I want to tell you that I am utterly surprised by the failure of the socialist movement. Now, I've heard that, shockingly, Hassan Piker has said some decent things on it. I haven't heard what he said yet. But Jabba the Bosch is on there beating the drums of war. First of all, Jabba the Vosh is not a Marxist in any conceivable way. He apparently believes this whole thing is caused by Putin's ego, right? That is his analysis. Well, the whole thing is caused by Putin's ego. I have a huge ego, and if I had a huge ego, I might start a war and kill a bunch of people. So Putin must be doing that thing. I mean, that's the depth of this man's analysis. So if you're getting your Marxism from Vosh, God help me, you're not. Reminder that Russia still has nukes plus a sizable military nearer Ukraine than any U.S. bases. They'll get there the firstest with the mostest. Indeed, you are not wrong, good sir. You are not wrong. But regardless, Vosh thinks that this is all caused by quote unquote Putin's ego, right? Vosh is not a Marxist in any conceivable way. That's not scientific material analysis. That is unbelievably pathetic. Right? There is an underlying force driving this, and it's called economics. And it's called imperialism. And it's called the fact that Russia used to be, in the 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union, an impoverished country that was being devastated and looted by imperialism. And now they have pulled themselves up from poverty. They have restored their economy. They're selling oil and gas on the international markets in competition with Wall Street oil and gas companies. That's what this is about. They didn't hate Russia when it was impoverished in the 1990s under Boris Yeltsin. Now they hate Russia. And the reason they now hate Russia is because Russia is once again a competitor. And let me add that there is a particular situation right now that makes them even more desperate to be hostile to Russia. And that is that the natural gas prices are through the roof. Natural gas prices are through the roof right now. Jabba the Vosh, the cappuccino communist. Absolutely. Natural gas prices are very high right now. In Europe, it's an exceptionally cold winter. There's a lot of natural gas being sold. And the price is very high. Russia wants to fix that. They have this thing called the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And if they turn the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, this pipeline that's connected to Germany, if they turn it on, all of a sudden, Russian natural gas will flow into Europe, and the price of natural gas will go down. Furthermore, if European countries can start importing natural gas, more natural gas from Gazprom, Bosch is a child who thinks he has an adult brain. Indeed. If more natural gas from Gazprom starts getting imported to Europe, the price goes down. That's how this works. The more natural gas on the market, the lower the price is. The more rare natural gas is, the higher it is. This is basic supply and demand. Russia has the ability to put natural gas into Europe and make the price go down. What does China have to say about these U.S. threats? Will they stand up to the USA as an ally? What does China say? Stand up to USA as an ally. If this natural gas from Russia were to go into Europe, the price would go down. And American natural gas companies that are making a killing right now, gouging, and British natural gas companies that are making a killing right now, gouging, they would all lose out on their mega profits that they are making. And that is why they are determined. They're determined to keep this going. But it gets worse. It gets worse. One of the threats that's being leveled against Russia, right? Biden said that he would make Russia's economy worse than they can imagine, with new sanctions if this confrontation takes place, is to one of the threats made is to cut Russia out of the SWIFT banking system. Well, here's the thing. If Russia no longer has access to the SWIFT international banking system, at that point, Russia cannot sell oil and gas. How are people going to make their orders for oil and gas? If you can't make a bank transfer to Russia, no one can buy oil and nobody can buy gas from Russia. Right? Iran has been cut out of the SWIFT banking system. And it's very difficult for Iran to export its oil. There's a lot of sanctions. And this would be a situation where Russia would not have access. They're threatening to cut off Russia's access to the SWIFT banking system. Now, these oil companies and these natural gas companies on Wall Street and in the London Stock Exchange, they're dying for this. That would be perfect. Can you imagine if you owned a business and the global banking system announced that your competitor wasn't allowed to send bank transfers anymore? That would be like the best thing you could ever ask for. These oil monopolists they want this so bad. They are making a killing right now. Can you imagine how much money they're making at this point? I mean, look at your gas bill. Do you pay for your own heat? I don't. I rent. But if you own your own house, look at your gas bill and compare it to last year's gas bill. They are making so much money at this point. There was a coup in Burkina Faso yesterday. All right. Okay. West African events. They are making a killing, but it's not enough. It's not enough. They want more and more and more. If the war broke out, do you expect liberalism to collapse into illiberalism earlier than before? All right. Do you expect liberalism into illiberalism? This is a situation where these oil and gas monopolies, the oil banking elite that I wrote about in my book, Oil and the Global Capitalist Crisis, they are milking this for all it's worth. If you're mad about your gas bill, you're mad about the gas prices, right? I mean, it's at this point in New York City, we're up to $4.67 a gallon. Right? I mean, that's how much gasoline is costing at this point. Last year, it was about $2.37 this time. If you're mad about the oil price and what you pay at the gas tank, you're mad about the natural gas price, you should be even more mad about this situation because that's not enough for them. They are taking the world to the brink of war. They're hoping that they can get Russia blocked out of the SWIFT international banking system, all so that they can rake in more and more super profits. The Rockefellers don't have enough money. The Carnegies don't have enough money. The Koch brothers don't have enough money, right? I'm worried about the families throughout Ohio and Pennsylvania and California. I'm worried about the people living on Skid Row in Los Angeles. I'm worried about the working families of Texas, but right now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Joe Manchin and Nancy Pelosi, they're all sitting there, Ted Cruz, they're sitting there going, oh boy, the Rockefeller banking dynasty doesn't have enough money. Oh boy, the Koch brothers and the fracking cowboys don't have enough money. Oh boy, the Getty family and the Morgans and the DuPonts with their billions and billions of dollars, they don't have enough money. So we're going to take the world closer to war. We're going to try to escalate things so bad that we can cut Russia out of the international banking system, so bad that people are shooting each other in Ukraine, so bad that these people can make more money. I mean, it's unbelievable. Did you hear that CNN dumped out a Sundance documentary exposing Navalny's role in Russian politics? I did not hear that, but I will talk about that. Navalny Oh, Russian politics. That's what they're worried about. This war is an economic stimulus package. It's a stimulus package to the oil banking elite. Go and watch my speech, Oil and the Global Capitalist Crisis, from Brazil, or you can read the book. It's available. Short book, only 60 pages, explaining how these oil banking elites dominate the world. And you know who else this is a bailout for? This is a bailout for Boeing and Raytheon and General Electric. Because every time lethal weapons get sent over to Europe, and every time NATO has, they're selling weapons here. This is a great example of corporate welfare. This is military corporations and natural gas companies and oil companies enriching themselves by pushing humanity toward the brink of war. This is a very, very dangerous situation. Instead of fighting for us, Joe Biden is fighting for the richest people that you can imagine. Joe Biden is fighting for the wealthiest, most powerful capitalists, most powerful military corporations. He's fighting for them. He's putting the world at risk to enrich his Wall Street banking friends, his military contractor friends. Meanwhile, the price of food is rising. Meanwhile, people don't have decent pay at their jobs. Meanwhile, there's a crisis of food insecurity in this country. Working families are struggling to get by. I'll let you in on a little dirty secret that U.S. media does not want you to know. You know how the price of food is super high right now? Right? I went to a grocery store today, and a loaf of bread, it's almost $4, almost $5 for a decent loaf of bread. It's unbelievable. Right? In Manhattan, it's always high, but I just want to let you in on a little secret. If you're mad about inflation, if you're mad about the rising cost of gasoline, if you're mad about the rising cost of food, milk, eggs, cheese, bread, if you are mad about these things, Joe Biden could fix them with the stroke of a pen, the same way that Richard Nixon did. When this was happening, when there was a huge inflation taking place in 1971, Richard Nixon imposed a 90-day price control, a 90-day price freeze on all items. Who cares what Jason's doing? Who cares? All right. A 90-day price control. And it got inflation under control. It's called one of the Nixon shocks. Congress doesn't have to pass a law. No law required. With an executive order, the President of the United States could immediately stop the rising food prices. And mainstream media doesn't want you to know this. They don't want you to know this. They want to just pretend, oh, no, there's nothing Biden can do. It's a free market economy. We don't have communism. Bullshit. Joe Biden could impose price controls. He could impose price controls for 90 days. And he ain't doing that. He's not freezing the cost of the heating gas, even though it's much more expensive to heat your home this year than it was last year. He's not freezing the price of food so that working families can feed their kids. Nope. Not freezing the price of gasoline. Nope. Joe Biden is fighting like hell and taking the world to the brink of war to enrich the pockets of Raytheon and General Electric and the big oil companies and the big banking dynasties. But he will not fight for you. And I don't know if you saw, but some Fox News reporter or somebody was asking Joe Biden, lately about inflation, and he said, "Ah, that stupid son of a bitch." Did you see that? Yeah, just like such a classy president we've got. Right? Let's go, Brandon, if ever. What a let's grow Brandon moment. But that's the situation we're in. That's the situation we're in. But this is a podcast for socialists and communists. This isn't a podcast. This is a stream, I should say. I told you about how unbelievably bad Jabba the Vosh is. Wah, 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 wah. This is all because Putin has an ego. I mean, I have an ego, and I would kill millions of people and start World War III over my ego. I mean, that's Jabba the Vosh thinks this is all just psychological, right? He's got a psychoanalysis of this, right? William William Henry Harrison died in 30 days. I don't even know. I don't know what that means, but there you go. Um, you know, there's that. There's that. And I'm utterly shocked. And that forces me to revisit one of the most important, I shouldn't say the most important, but a very important pamphlet. Thank you for exposing imperialism. Your message is refreshing. You got it. Because in 1914, the socialist movement of Germany and France and Britain, they also were dominated by social imperialists, people who wouldn't stand up and challenge wars. And Rosa Luxemburg, the great Marxist revolutionary of Germany, Rosa Luxemburg, she wrote an amazing pamphlet, the Junius pamphlet. And I was reading the Junius pamphlet the other day. And the words of the Junius pamphlet, written in 1914, well over 100 years ago, absolutely spoke to me. Rosa Luxemburg wrote this pamphlet, the Junius pamphlet, exposing the Young Turks and the Vosches and the DSA leadership and the AOCs of her time. The social imperialists were leading the world to the brink of war. She wrote this beautiful pamphlet called the Junius pamphlet, talking about how imperialism was tearing apart Europe. And it was the duty of all working people to stand against imperialism. The Junius pamphlet by Rosa Luxemburg. Just going to read you a couple of the best passages from the Junius pamphlet by Rosa Luxemburg, calling out the social imperialists. I mean, this is some amazing writing. Rosa Luxemburg had amazing skills as a writer. I'm just going to pull this up for you. The Junius pamphlet by Rosa Luxemburg. It was an anti-war essay, but it was more than that. It was an essay exposing the elements in the socialist movement that don't dare to stand up to war. This is what she wrote. Violated, dishonored, wading in blood, dripping filth, there stands bourgeois society. This is it in reality. Not all spick and span and moral, with pretense to culture, philosophy, ethics, order, peace, and the rule of law, but the ravening beast, the witch's Sabbath of anarchy, a plague to the culture and humanity. Thus it reveals itself in its true and its naked form. That's what she's describing about World War I, right? When working people were being marched off to die in muddy trenches and poison gas was being used, chemical weapons. She said, violated, dishonored, wading in blood, dripping in filth, there stands bourgeois society. This is it in reality. Not all spick and span and moral, with the pretense of culture, philosophy, ethics, order, and peace, and the rule of law, but the ravening beast, the witch's Sabbath of anarchy, a plague to the culture and humanity. Thus it reveals itself in true naked form. And then she said, one thing is certain. The world war is a turning point. It is foolish and mad to imagine that we need only survive the war like a rabbit waiting out the storm under a bush in order to fall happily back into the old routine once it's over. The world war has altered the conditions of our struggle, and most of all, it has changed us. Not that the basic law of capitalist development, the life and death war between capital and labor, will experience any amelioration. But now, in the midst of the war, The masks are falling, and the old familiar visages smirk at us. The tempo of development has received a mighty jolt from the eruption of the volcano of imperialism. The violence of conflicts in the bosom of society, the enormous tasks that tower up before the socialist proletariat, these make everything that has transpired in the history of the workers' movement seem a pleasant idyll. These are powerful words. Socialism is the first popular movement in the world, in world history, that has set itself the goal of bringing human consciousness and thereby free will into play in the social actions of mankind. For this reason, Friedrich Engels designated the final leap, the final victory of the socialist proletariat, as a leap of humanity from the animal world into the realm of freedom. This leap is also an iron law of history, bound to thousands of seeds of a prior torment, filled and all too slow development. But this can never be realized until the development of complex material conditions strikes the incendiary spark of consciousness, will into the masses. The victory of socialism will not descend from heaven. It can only be won by a long chain of violent tests of strength between the old and new powers. The international proletariat, under the leadership of the Social Democrats, will thereby learn to try to take its history into its hands instead of remaining the will-less football. It will take the tiller of social life and become the pilot of its own history. Friedrich Engels once said, "Bourgeois society stands at the crossroads, either transition to socialism or regression into barbarism." That's Rosa Luxemburg. What do you think about the Federal Reserve? Raise interest rates. Okay. Raise interest rates. Halt inflation. That's the situation we're in. That is the situation we're in. That war brings out the ugliest side of human beings. Little family story, right? I think I can share this, right? I don't often share things from my own family, but this is the individuals involved in this are dead. But when I was a kid, I had a grandfather, and my grandfather, who died when I was a freshman in college, he fought in the Second World War. He fought in World War II, and interestingly, he joined the U.S. Marine Corps. The U.S. Marine Corps, and he was in the U.S. Marine Corps, but he took an intelligence test, and they assessed that he had a very high IQ, and so they moved him to the U.S. Navy to become a Navy officer. But he enlisted, and he went through basic training in the U.S. Marine Corps. And this was a traumatic experience for my grandfather. And for his entire life, he hated the U.S. Marine Corps. Whenever he would see the image of the U.S. Marine Corps, he would curse. He just hated the U.S. Marine Corps because of what he experienced in his basic training. Now he was not a leftist or a socialist or anything like that. He was a conservative Republican. He was very proud of his military service, very patriotic, very right wing, very conservative. But what he experienced in the U.S. Marine Corps was so traumatic that he just had this gut level hatred for the U.S. Marine Corps his whole life. But it gets even more interesting, because it wasn't just what he experienced in basic training that made him hate the U.S. Marine Corps. It was also what happened to all the people he enlisted with. And that was, after the war was over, after he got out of the U.S. Navy, he went back to Missouri, where he grew up, to try and meet up with the other guys that he served and went through basic training in the U.S. Marine Corps with. And he really couldn't meet up with them because they were all dead. Except for one man. Every single person in the division of the U.S. Marine Corps my grandfather was in was dead, except for one man. My grandfather met with this one survivor of the U.S. Marine Corps division that he had gone through training with. And the man had very severe PTSD and was not well. They didn't call it PTSD back then. They had another name for it. But the guy was not well psychologically. But he showed my grandfather his new car. And he showed my grandfather, he said, the best thing I got out of World War II was this car. And he pointed to kind of a fancy car. And he said, I bought this car with gold that I pulled out of the teeth of Japanese corpses. And my grandfather was utterly horrified. Utterly horrified. Writing it down. Utterly horrified by that. And that is an example of how war brings out the most animalistic, barbaric side of human beings. It reduces people to vicious killers and predators and murderers. And this is what Rosa Luxemburg, okay, gray zone, we'll talk about that. This is what Rosa Luxemburg is getting at in her pamphlet, right? She's watching World War I break out in Europe. And she's saying, you know, bourgeois society, claimed to be so progressive, is disintegrating into the most utter, disgusting barbarism that we have ever seen. And that socialism is about trying to get people to act like human beings and not like animals and not like barbarians. And that if socialism does not defeat imperialism, there's a good chance, there's a very good chance that Western civilization will regress and will collapse. All wars, class war, simple. All right. Audiobook readers. All right. Audiobook readers. Here's down. California statewide health care bill. Talk about that. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So that's what Rosa Luxemburg is getting at. That's what she's getting at. And this, I pointed out in my recent polemic. I wrote a polemical essay recently about Marxism and some other things. And in that essay, I pointed out that one of the assumptions that a lot of Western Marxists have, they think that the world is just forever going to be centered around Western capitalism, that the Western capitalists are forever going to be at the center of the universe. And they're wrong. Right now in the United States, we're headed towards some kind of societal collapse. That's pretty clear. Meanwhile, Russia and China, Eurasia, is ascending. And if the West collapses into barbarism, then the world will just recenter around Russia and China. That's all that will happen. Right? The world is not going to remain centered around the West forever. And if the West doesn't move towards socialism, we don't break with the Atlanticist, open international system, imperialism, capitalism in its monopoly stage, then we're just going to continue disintegrating into barbarism. and the world will be centered around Russia and China. And that is a reality that people in the socialist movement need to come to terms with. This is the mindset of the 1960s, that our job is to be here in the homeland, stirring up chaos and creating instability. No, our job is to be the bringers of order, to put forward that we need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need the kind of government that would stand up to companies like Kraft, companies like ExxonMobil, BP, and Shell, and fight for working families and impose a price freeze instead of escalating with Russia. Imagine that we had a government that, instead of escalating with Russia, escalated with ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, Kraft, Kellogg's, all the food manufacturers. Imagine that. And don't tell me that Joe Biden can't do it. Don't give me that. Oh, he's too weak. The Republicans are too strong. Do you remember how many people were in the streets during the Black Lives Matter uprising? Imagine if Joe Biden got on TV as the president and he said, I am imposing a price freeze on all the corporations. And then he called up all of his, allies in the Black Lives Matter movement, all the Antifa people, all of the people the Democrats pull out into the streets, and he sent them to go occupy the offices of these corporations. Imagine that. And imagine that instead of going out in the streets and burning small businesses, Joe Biden used the Democratic Party's propaganda apparatus to incite mobs of people to go seize the corporate headquarters of ExxonMobil and occupy the building. And imagine that, right? Imagine that. Could you imagine that? If Joe Biden used the strength of the Democratic Party and used the position he had as the president of the United States, not to wage war with Russia, but to wage class war against the big banks and corporations. Imagine that. He would never do that. Joe Biden would never do that, but he could. Don't tell me he couldn't. He could very easily do it. The Democratic Party has a whole army of supporters. Why do you think it is that there's so many people on the internet trying to cancel us and call us, oh, you're a crypto Trumper and you're a, red, brown. Where do all these people come from? They have a huge apparatus of people who do their bidding. And imagine if they used that apparatus of people to wage class war, to force corporations to lower the prices of food, lower the prices of gasoline. Imagine that Joe Biden decided that he was going to pass Medicare for all and called out all of his supporters and had all of his allies at CNN and MSNBC urging everyone to go out and march for Medicare for all and confront the big drug companies, big pharmaceutical companies. Imagine that. And he could do it, but he doesn't want to do it. What was the CARES Act? The largest? I don't know about that. I don't know. He won't do that. He's not going to do that. Why would he do that? Right? Because Joe Biden works for the rich and powerful. He doesn't work for you and me. Joe Biden is edging us closer to World War III, putting the whole world in danger because he works for the small class of billionaires who benefit from it, who benefit from all of this. He doesn't work for America's working families who are suffering right now. He doesn't work for the people that are worried about the price of food. He doesn't work for the, I've heard the story many times. If you go to a gas station in the Midwest, you hang out long enough at that gas station, you're going to see, a mother drive up to the gas station, get out of her car, go to that gas tank and very carefully pull that gas pump out, stick it in the gas tank, and very carefully put like $5 worth of gasoline into her car. $5, $6, and just really carefully, just barely put any gasoline into the car pump. and then pull the gas pump out, stick it back in, and drive away. Why would anybody do that? If you're going to go to the gas tank, you want to get a whole tank of gas. But she can't afford it. And that means she's on a serious budget. She's got to get her kids to work. Or she's got to get her kids to school. She's got to get herself to work. She's got to get to the grocery store so she can get some food. But she's barely making it. Just putting $5 of gas into that car. Right? That is America right now. That is what America has done for the working people. Now it wants to send a bunch of working class men and women from small towns in Pennsylvania and Minnesota and Texas and Idaho and Oklahoma and young men from Philadelphia and Atlanta. You go into the military, they say it's rap music and country music. It's poor white people from rural areas, and it's urban African Americans. Country and rap, right? Low income African American folks in urban centers don't have opportunity. They go into the military. Low income white folks from Appalachia, from Oklahoma, from Tennessee. The South is disproportionately represented in the U.S. military, black and white, right? The South is far more military influenced than the rest of the country. Folks from Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, the Florida Panhandle, very big influence of the military in the Florida Panhandle. Those are the folks that Joe Biden wants to send to Ukraine to help protect a bunch of neo-Nazis, to help protect the Avaz battalion, to help protect the very people that are tearing down memorials to the fight against fascism, tearing down World War II memorials. Joe Biden wants to send young men and women from the heartland of America, young men and women from our urban centers, young men and women from the South, young men and women from the rural areas of America. He wants to send them to go get shot in Ukraine to protect a bunch of neo-Nazis, a bunch of white supremacists, a bunch of people who burn World War II memorials. Can you think of a more disgraceful thing to do? There should not be one single American who should die for the Avaz battalion. Not one single American should ever get shot at for the Stepan Bandera fan club. Not one bit of American blood should be shed to prop up the far-right extremists and historical revisionists in Kiev. Not one. If one American soldier gets their head shot off, or gets their arm shot off, or gets their leg shot off, because Joe Biden wants to help his buddies at ExxonMobil make better profits off of natural gas, Joe Biden should be tried for treason. You want to talk about patriotism. You want to talk about disloyalty to the country. Joe Biden says patriotism is getting a shot in the arm. I say that patriotism is when you fight for the working families, not when you send American troops off to die. And this is disgraceful. It is utterly disgraceful that Joe Biden would even consider that. He supported all the free trade legislation, destroying the jobs of American workers. He supported all the crime bills and mass incarceration. And now old Joe Biden wants to shed American blood, wants to send Americans off to die in a war to protect a bunch of neo-Nazis and the profits of big corporations. If there's ever been a let's go Brandon moment, it's been this one. Joe Biden is an absolute disgrace. Absolute disgrace. And it is our responsibility not to let him drag us into a war. And that absolutely must be said. There's nothing for the American working class in Ukraine. Going, fighting, and dying in Ukraine is not in any way going to raise the living standards of Appalachia or the Midwest or the South. Going and fighting and dying in Ukraine is not in any way going to bring housing to those people in Skid Row in Los Angeles, that huge encampment of homeless, hungry people. Going and fighting and dying in Ukraine is not going to end the opioid epidemic. And the war in Afghanistan that went on for 20 years helped that opioid epidemic. Going and fighting and dying in Ukraine is not going to tear down the prison industrial complex. Going and fighting and dying in Ukraine is not going to help pave our roads that are crumbling. It's not going to bring clean drinking water to the communities throughout the United States that don't have it. ML's criticized Putin. Writing it down. Going and fighting and dying in Ukraine will not benefit the working people of this country in any conceivable way. It's not going to end police brutality. It's not going to end the low wages. It's not going to rebuild the country that's falling apart. There's nothing for us in Ukraine. There is nothing for the working people of America in Ukraine. Nothing. The only kind of war that is going to benefit American working families is a war against Wall Street. It's a war against the Pentagon. It's a war against the big, huge corporations and banks, the huge international monopolies that are driving countries all across the world into poverty, that are driving working families into desperation. A war against Jeff Bezos, a war against Bill Gates, a war against the Rockefellers and the DuPonts and the Carnegies and the Koch brothers, a war against Bernie Marcus, the owner of Home Depot, a war against Betsy DeVos, the education secretary of Donald Trump, who is tied to military contracting corporations. A class war, a war against the bankers, a war against the capitalists, a war to dismantle their system that puts profits over people, a war to break the United States out of their open international system. Instead, let the United States join arm in arm with Russia and China and Venezuela in international friendship and cooperation. A class war against imperialism. Now that is the kind of war that would benefit America's working people. And Joe Biden's not leading us into that kind of war. The only kind of war that could actually benefit the working families of America is a class war, a war against the capitalists, a war against the billionaires, a war against the monopolists and their system. That's the kind of war that would benefit average Americans. That's the war that guys from Atlanta and guys from Oklahoma and guys from Tennessee and Minnesota would benefit from fighting in. That would be a war where they'd be fighting in their own interests. Now, let me be clear. We advocate a peaceful transition to socialism. We don't want a war. We want democracy. We want the people of the United States to exercise their democratic rights and to peacefully transition the country towards socialism. We want the people of the United States to come together and elect a government of action that will fight for working families. We need another Abraham Lincoln. We need another Roosevelt. Distraction to approval ratings. All right. We need another Roosevelt. We need another Huey Long in this country. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. That's what we need. Let's see. That's what we need. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We don't want there to be a big war. We don't want this country to come apart in civil war. We don't want this country to collapse. We want this country to start moving towards socialism. We want a government of action that will fight for working families, a working people's government, a government of workers and farmers. That's what we want. We want a government that will focus not on trying to beat back Russia, but on trying to eradicate poverty. We want a government that will focus on building Fusion City and making scientific breakthroughs. We want a government that will build hospitals and schools, not military bases overseas. That's what we want. That's what we want. And I know a lot of you watching know this, and you've heard it many, many times. Sure, Neil Fraser gets it, right? Start violence. You've all heard this many, many times before, but it all bears repeating. It all bears repeating because what I've said here tonight for the last hour is what you need to be saying to your coworkers at your job. If you work in an office, you need to have this conversation with every single one of your coworkers. Every single one of your coworkers who will hear you. You've got to tell them that we should not have soldiers in Ukraine. We should not be backing up the neo-Nazis. We should not be threatening war with Russia. If you're a university student, when your college says, your college professor says, has anyone looked into current events today? You've got to raise your hand. And you've got to say, yes, I do have looked into world events. And Joe Biden is leading us into a war that we have no business in. We have no business in Ukraine. And we shouldn't be in there. And Russia is not a threat. And Joe Biden's a liar. That's what you got to do. You got to raise your hand in that class. You live in a dorm room at your university and you walk into the lounge room. You got to say to all the people in the dorm room, hey, I know you're not into politics. Maybe you're into sports, football, basketball, whatever. But there's a serious situation here. And Joe Biden is trying to take us into a war that we have no business in. And he's trying to do it to make money for natural gas companies. We have no business in Ukraine. That's what you got to do. Right? If you work at a fast food job, if you're, getting dressed in the back room ready for your shift, right? If you're while you're, making the hamburgers or whatever, while you're operating the fryer machine, you got to say to your coworkers, don't want to get all political here, but we're on the brink of possibly getting into a war that we have no business in. You've got to say this over and over and over again. You got to tell your parents that. You got to tell your brother and your sister that. You got to tell your cousins that. You got to tell everybody this. We need to be screaming this from the heavens right now. And so forgive me if I sound like a broken record, but I'm telling you all the things that you yourself need to be saying. And you need to be saying it on your Facebook. And you need to be saying it on your Twitter. And you need to be saying it on your Instagram. And you need to be saying it on Reddit. And you need to be saying it everywhere. You know how many, they got troll farms full of Ukrainian nut jobs that are spewing out stuff. We got to push back against these people. We are going to stop this war. We are going to stop this war. This war shall not pass. I hate to be so gosh darn serious, but moments like this require such seriousness. They require seriousness. I end my streams every night, and I'm not ending the stream now. This is not the end of the stream. But you'll know that I end my streams. I always recite the words of Mao Zedong. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. What does that mean? The danger of a new world war still exists. The people of all countries must get prepared. But revolution is the main trend in the world today. Well, when we say revolution is the main trend in the world today, and that the danger of a new world war still exists, what we're saying is that we want to have a society where science is in command, where rational human reason is in command. That's what the word revolution means. That's where its origins come from. It comes from those who dared to say that the earth revolves around the sun, that the earth is not the center of the universe. That revolution and the struggle of human beings to reach a higher plane must prevail. And yes, that war is a danger. But the main trend in the world today is people pushing forward, that historical progress prevails over the danger of war. That's what Mao Zedong was saying when he wrote those beautiful words. And that's why I'm saying those words to you right now. So I just wanted to open my stream that way. So at this point, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. And now I think we'll do our roll call, and then I'll start answering these super chat questions. So there we go. So who's with us tonight? Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Who's with us? Who is with us tonight? Cleveland Pirate Alex is with us. Very good. Cleveland Pirate Alex. Ryan in Oakland, Chaya in Montreal, Atlanta, Georgia. All right. Whoa. All right. Ryan in Oakland, Southampton, Io Hillary in New York City. Shout out to you. Reese Jarrett from Adelaide, Australia. Micah from Las Vegas. Bradley Wasser, stuck in Pennsylvania, Troy. Fox in Wales. Zachary Bunch, Richmond, Virginia. Southwest Michigan. Steve, David in China. Christian in Northern New Jersey. Robert from Hawaii. Don D in NYC. Clyde Bank. James Graham, New Jersey. Zach from Dallas. Nathaniel from Washington, Kieran from San Diego, Anthony from Detroit, West Virginia, Bob Troy in New York, Los Angeles, Calgary, Canada, Marissa in Olympia, Washington, Temple City, California, Jared from Virginia, St. David's, Bermuda, Patty in Joshua Tree, shout out to you, Kinky, Washington State, Megan, Arkansas, Southampton, Eric in Las Vegas, Workers of All Countries Unite, says David Fox, great friend of the program, right? Grand Junction, Colorado, Edmonton, Alberta, Ash from Chicago. Whoa. All right. Ash from Chicago, Mindanao to Midwest. Sean from Phoenix, San Jose, Big Island of Hawaii, Dorian in Northeast LA, Neil Fraser in Hong Kong, Melbourne, Australia, Bendigo, Australia, David from Burlington, Vermont, Peter from New York, Joey in San Angelo, Texas, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Montreal, Curfew Central, Liz in Portland, Lockport, New York, Blue Moon, Brazil, right? Bro from Fard on camera, Mindanao to Midwest, New Jersey, Dan Keating, Chicago, Illinois, Southampton, right? Northern Michigan, David Rennie in Hamilton, Ontario, OK, which stands for Oklahoma, I think, right? Dual in Boston, United Kingdom, Chris in Salt Lake City, Char Darling out in San Angelo. Shout out to you. Lanny of Sutton Grange, Southampton, UK, Greensboro, North Carolina, Sao Paulo, Brazil. Wow, St. Paul, Minnesota. Jamie in St. Paul, Minnesota. Daniel in Oakland. Shout out to you, Daniel in Oakland. Anybody else? Names and locations as I call them out. We got a few super chats to get through, but that's okay. We can do it. We can do it because we are amazing. We are an awesome group of people, and we can do amazing things like stop the war. That's what we can do. Daniel in Oakland, Orange in Australia. All righty. Very good, folks. Very good. All right. So now I answer your super chat questions. I've got them typed up here, and we'll do the first one. Do you think the USA will ever do a large-scale invasion again? I think it's very possible. Yes, I do think it's very possible the USA could do a large-scale invasion again. Now, obviously, Russia and China and Iran and Venezuela are a check on their power. And that's good. Looking forward to your convo with Jackson Hinkle. Yeah, it's coming up. Should be good. I think it's this weekend we're supposed to talk. I'm confirming the time. But yeah, Jackson Hinkle and I are going to talk. But yes, it's possible the USA could do a large-scale invasion again. But yes, that was pivotal. In 2013, when Obama was on the brink of sending cruise missiles to Syria and invading Syria, and Russia and China forced him back, that was a turning point. And that was an important moment. And that was the only time I've ever been on CNN, mind you. My one CNN appearance was when Obama was on the brink of attacking Syria in September of 2013. So that was a pivotal moment. Why did the West run out of Afghanistan? Well, I think that they realized that they could utilize Afghanistan as a strategic epicenter of chaos. They realized that making Afghanistan Russia, China, and Iran's problem rather than the USA's problem was strategic. They'd been there for a long time, fomenting chaos and unrest. So there you go. What do you think of Socialist Alternative Party? All right, wrote it down. And that they were trying to foment instability there. And for 20 years, the drug gangs got worse in Afghanistan, and instability expanded, and U.S. soldiers died, and terrorist groups got stronger. And finally, the USA said, you know what? We've wrecked the place enough. Now we're going to make Russia and China and Iran spend all of their money trying to stabilize it. And they pulled out. And they pulled out in a chaotic way, designed to cause instability. And there you go. Will we see more Bonapartism? Well, when you have a capitalist crisis, when there is instability, the capitalists do fight with each other, and they try to stabilize the economy. That is the natural development of a capitalist crisis. So yes, as long as the capitalist crisis continues, as long as the rate of profit is dropping, there will be factions in the ruling class that will struggle with each other to try and take control of the government. Yes. Xi Jinping's involvement at the World Economic Forum. Well, look, China is a very important player in the global economy. China very much wants countries to trade with China. And China is going to have to be part of some of these institutions if it wants to be part of the global economy. Right now, the United States is trying to force China out of the global economy. But there you go. Brzezinski's Grand Chessboard, Eurasia is the base for global war. Well, the Grand Chessboard is a book by Zbigniew Brzezinski, where he argues that domination of Eurasia is key. And the idea of Eurasia as the world island, this is geopolitics, right? I think it was the British that developed the first theories of geopolitics when they wrote about dominating the world by control of the Navy. With the Navy, they could dominate the world by dominating the trade routes, and that was the origin of Atlanticism. And NATO is the kind of the modern incarnation of the Atlanticist ideology. It's the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. If you Google the term Atlanticist, it says one who believes in the NATO coalition. Now, obviously, adherents of geopolitics have a different definition of the term. They believe it refers to a model in global trade in which the trade routes are dominated. The trade routes are dominated by great powers. People talk about the British system or the English system. Henry Carey wrote about the English system versus the American system. These are theories of development rooted in geopolitics. And yeah, people You know, the idea of Eurasia being very important. Gotta go. I'll have to get my super chat answers on a replay. Thanks for everything you do, Caleb. Sure thing, Tusker, and I will answer your super chats. I wrote them all down. All righty. What does China say? Will they stand up to the USA as an ally? Well, very soon, there's going to be a very big announcement about Russia and China solidifying their military relationship. There's going to be some pretty big announcements about that, from what I understand. There's been buzz about that on these live streams already. But yes, Russia and China are joined at the hip at this point. Not to say there aren't disagreements, but they're so closely tied together economically. Their militaries train together, etc. West African events. Well, as you're aware, this pandemic is economically devastating Africa. Malnutrition-related deaths in Africa have skyrocketed because of this pandemic. No one's talking about this. It's not getting any coverage. U.S. media never talks about this, but malnutrition as a result of the pandemic and the economic fallout has killed millions of people in Africa. And right now, there is a lot of instability in many African countries because of this, because people are desperate and hungry. And we're not hearing about it in U.S. media. It's been kind of blotted out. Meanwhile, China is a very important force in Africa right now, and Russia as well. Russia has a lot of influence in Africa as well. But the United States is the primary force. The United States maintains AFRICOM in order to try and dominate the region, right? And there's U.S. military forces in Nigeria. There's U.S. drone strike operations. So, as a result of this, there's going to be instability. Now, I can't speak to the specific events you raised, but yes, there is ongoing instability on the African continent at this time. If war breaks out, do you expect liberalism to collapse into illiberalism earlier than before? Well, it would have to. It would have to, Christian. But there's a little bit of a problem with this. And that is the U.S. doesn't seem like it's to the point of illiberalism well enough to wage a world war. I'm sorry, look at U.S. society right now. You think they could have a world war? Like a full-on world war, like World War I or World War II, where they mobilize the whole population? I don't think so. I don't think they have that much discipline. I don't think they have that much coordination. If anything, most of the people that go and fight, and in this war might be people from other countries. It may be these green card soldiers, right? They go to Latin America and they promise people green cards if they go and fight for the United States. And, they have, U.S. military service as a pathway to citizenship. And I mean, the idea that they're going to draft, young people from this country and send them off to die. I mean, look at Russia's military and look at our military and our population. I really find it hard to believe that Biden's going to be able to convince people to go all in for this war. And that's something to think about. That's certainly something to think about. So, something to be aware of. Yes. There you go. Next question. Navalny's role in Russian politics. The person was referring to some documentary. Navalny is a fringe element. He's tied, was a neo-Nazi at one point. He's referred to certain ethnic groups, compared them to flies, and talked about exterminating them. He's hung out with Hitler-admiring people. Navalny is somebody that U.S. media loves. They just love him. They love to talk about him and play him up. But at the end of the day, his base of support is very small. There's a lot of kind of wealthy kids from urban areas in Russia who like him, but that's it. Among the broader population, he doesn't support. How does the current situation in Ukraine relate to the grand chessboard geopolitical theories? Okay. Ukraine situation relate to grand chessboard theories. All right. Very good. And that's Navalny, and he's clearly backed by the United States, and he's, the United States' favorite Russian dissident. There are people in Russia that disagree with the government, but, Navalny doesn't represent all of those people. He represents one particular pro-Western faction among them, and that's it. So there you go. What else? Raising interest rates to halt inflation. Yeah, again, compared to what a price control could do, that wouldn't do very much. So there you go. Havana Syndrome bill. Yeah, they continue to blame Cuba. Is John Kerry a disciple of Brzezinski? Right? Um, Banna syndrome bill. This is, I guess, it's an attempt to punish Cuba for the fact that American diplomats got sick or supposedly had sound weapons pointed at them or had Havana syndrome. I mean, they're coming up. There's a fanatical anti-Cuban lobby. The Miami folks. They want to do everything they can to go after Cuba. And so there you go. Yeah, I saw Samira's tweet. I mean, I know what she's getting at. That kind of borders on, I get what she's saying. Let me just put it that way. I love Samira. She's awesome. Great friend of mine. She's great. And I mean, that's not the way I would put it. I want to be sensitive, but at the same time, I get what she's getting at. U.S. military is not, is not anything like the Russian military. Let me just put it that way. There you go. Gray Zone, I think Gray Zone is awesome. I love Max Blumenthal. I love Alex Rubinstein, who does work with them. He's awesome. I love everything they do. And yeah, I know Ben Norton is, that Ben Norton is now, he's got his own outlet. I guess there was some disagreement or something. That's cool. Ben Norton does great work also. I like what he does. And, I just, hey, we're all cool. Do I need audiobook reader volunteers? Yes. You want to start audiobook reading some of my books and posting it online? If I like it, I might repost it. So yes, if you want to be a volunteer and read an audiobook for me, go ahead. Charlotte has done an amazing job. She read the entire Kamala Harris book. Char Darling, a beloved member of this community, did a great job reading the Kamala Harris book. So there you go. The California statewide healthcare bill. Yeah, great. Force them to pass Medicare for all on a state level, right? I think that's a great initiative. It's much more important to organize around that than defeating Trump or whatever. Can Marxist-Leninists criticize Putin? Of course they can. Of course Marxist-Leninists can criticize Putin, right? Just like you can criticize Xi Jinping in China, just like you can criticize Iran or Venezuela or Cuba, right? I'm not for blind apologism for anybody. Right? It's one thing. It's a matter of emphasis, though. You want to be strategic, right? U.S. media is constantly demonizing Putin, right? So it's like if you repeat that at this time, you're kind of helping build the case for war against Russia. But that said, we should be honest, right? We shouldn't pretend things that are true that are not. And we shouldn't say things that are false, right? We should be honest, right? Are there problems in Russia? Sure. Corruption is a problem in Russia. There's a lot of wealth inequality in Russia, right? Russia has its problems, right? We should be real about that. Russia isn't a paradise. The same goes for China. The same goes for Cuba. The same goes for Venezuela. The same goes for many anti-imperialist states. However, I think that we do have a responsibility to point to the good things about these countries because U.S. media is always demonizing them. But at the same time, we can be honest. There's no need to be dishonest or be a blind apologist. Pelosi, third time as speaker, squad. Yeah, I really doubt the squad is going to stand up to Nancy Pelosi. The fact that they came down so hard on force the vote the way they did makes me think that the squad is. And where's the squad on this war? Where's the squad on the danger of war right now? And where are they demanding Biden impose price controls? When I hear the squad stand up against the war drive, when I hear the squad demand price controls for food, then I think there might be hope for them to force the vote. But I'm glad Jimmy Dore called them out as they did. Now, Neil Fraser, our friend in Hong Kong, said, we don't start the violence. That's exactly correct, right? Advocating violence and advocating acts of adventurism and terrorism is not consistent with Marxism. Genuine Marxists have always opposed that kind of behavior. Always have, right? We advocate a peaceful transition to socialism. Violent revolutions only happen when the capitalists refuse to allow a peaceful transition to socialism. So there you go. This person says they're attempting to join the PSL, the CPUSA, and the PCUSA. What do I do? I'm sorry, what's this? The USA have its ass handed over in war with Taiwan. Reckon your books sound great in real Scottish accent. Hint, hint. Well, there you go. If you want to record, right? So what is it? Go ahead. Anyone who wants to record them, I think that'd be great to have my books read with a Scottish accent. I think that'd be awesome. But war over Taiwan, right? You're attempting to join these communist groups. They're not getting back to you. Well, that's a story as old as time. I had a friend who tried to join the Communist Party, and they called him back 5 years later. 5 years later. I swear, there is somebody in the Communist Party who's a secret Republican, and they wanted to make the Ronald Reagan joke come true. You ever hear this? Ronald Reagan told this anti-communist joke, about, it's an anti-communist joke that Ronald Reagan told about some guy in the Soviet Union. He buys a new car and they say, oh, it'll be delivered in 20 years. And he says, morning or afternoon. And they say, what do you mean? It's 20 years. He says, morning or afternoon. And they're like, why do you care? It's 20 years from now. And he says, oh, but the plumber is coming in the morning. Ha, 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 ha. Right? Communism is inefficient. Blah, 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 blah. Right? That's like a Ronald Reagan joke. So the Communist Party, this guy tried to join them, and they called him back 5 years later. And I thought, this is somebody trying to make a bad Ronald Reagan joke come true. It was awful. It was really, I couldn't believe it. But look, if you want to know what's wrong with PSL, my criticisms of PSL are available. If you go to the CPI USA website, we have a critique of the Marcyite tendency. The Communist Party USA, I know a lot of great people in the Communist Party. I have a lot of friends in the Communist Party. They have been having a lot of drama over me. They seem to be obsessed with me. There's some people in the group that are just terrified that I'm going to take over the Communist Party or something, which I have no intention of doing. But there's some, drama about me in the Communist Party. PC USA, I also know a lot of great people in the PC USA, great folks, that are in that organization. They helped sponsor our delegation to Nicaragua, the Center for Political Innovation's delegation to Nicaragua, and they're great, but at the end of the day, I'm building a think tank because I don't think any party is really going to be able to get to the broad masses of people. I'm engaging in the Center for Political Innovation, which is a socialist educational think tank. And right now, our team, our John Brown volunteers, are in Texas, Austin, Texas. We just found the space where we're going to have our event. It looks like our event is going to take place on March 12th in Austin, Texas. So we're going to have an amazing night of anti-imperialism, just an amazing anti-imperialist indoor event. It's going to be awesome. So if you're available to come to our very important event that we're having in Austin, Texas, that would be great. I would love to see you there. Socialist Alternative Party. Are they a party? I thought it was just Socialist Alternative. I didn't know they were Socialist Alternative Party. But there's a group in the United States called the Socialist Alternative. Socialist Alternative. And they're mainline Trotskyites, right? With Trotskyites, you get three types. You get neo-Trotskyites. Those are like Shachtmanites, followers of Tony Cliff. That's more of just kind of a general new left trend. They don't like any of the socialist countries. They're just kind of new left activists. Then you have, Orthodox Trotskyists. And Orthodox Trotskyists, they're very hardline folks. And their beliefs are very, very true to what Trotsky believes. And they tend to be very, very, very sectarian. You have the World Socialist website, Socialist Equality Party. You have the Spartacist League. You have the International Bolshevik Tendency. You have the Internationalist Group. Those folks are Orthodox Trotskyites. But then you have what you call mainline Trotskyites, and that's Socialist Alternative. They're a great example of that. And then you have the U.S. Socialist Workers Party. You have the International Marxist Tendency, the IMT, Workers International League. And those folks are, they really like labor unions. They're always kind of, pushing for the USA to form a labor party. And they kind of support anti-imperialist countries, but not really. They'll oppose wars, and they'll recognize that China and North Korea and Vietnam are workers' states, but they don't really support them when it really gets down to it. But they're really into labor unions and stuff like that. Those are like mainline Trotskyites. That's what Socialist Alternative are. And I know they have Kshama Sawant, who's in the city council in Seattle. She's one of them. Now, the Ukraine situation, how does it relate to the grand chessboard theories? Well, the main thing is that in Eurasia, you have a lot of land mass, You don't have ocean access, but you have a lot of wide landmass territories. But you have a lot of different ethnic groups. And those ethnic groups have been living next to each other for many, many thousands of years. Look, we think people in New York don't like people from Boston. People around the country think New Yorkers are snobs. New Yorkers think the rest of the country is flyover country. We've only been living on, other than the Native Americans, the United States has only been around for a few hundred years. Well, you go to Eurasia, Siberia, Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, China, these peoples, many different ethnic groups, many different, groupings. Those folks have been living next to each other for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and they know each other very, very, very well. They have frustrations with each other that are very, very, very deep, but they also have bonds and connections with each other that are very, very deep. Okay, it's a different ball game. And when the peoples of Eurasia are united, right? When regions are unified, that's when you see economic development and advancement in Eurasia. And when all the ethnic groups are fighting each other, that's when you see divisions, right? And that this is an aspect of understanding Eurasia that is something in the West we don't quite get, right? Go see Ivan the Terrible, great movie from the Soviet era that glorifies a czar, but it glorifies this czar who unified the peoples of modern Russia. In China, there's a lot of admiration for the Qing dynasty. Why? Because they unified China. They brought the people together. And this is important to understand. Is John Kerry a disciple of Zbigniew Brzezinski? I would say so, yes. That, there's this kind of soft power school that when John Kerry replaced Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, that was very much kind of a triumph for the Brzezinski wing of the Democratic Party, rather than for the I don't know what you want to call it, the permanent revolution, chaos, Hillary Clinton State Department faction. John Kerry became Secretary of State to replace Hillary Clinton. And as Secretary of State, he focused on negotiating the Iran deal, restoring relations with Cuba, getting the FARC peace deal signed. He was much more of a Cold War liberal type, right? The Cold War liberals and the Hillary Clinton State Department crowd are different, right? The Hillary Clinton State Department represents this chaos faction coming out of Silicon Valley. I see the influence of Marilyn Ferguson and the Aquarian conspiracy, etc. But a lot of these people, Biden, John Kerry, they're just old school liberals, right? They're corrupt politicians, but they're kind of Cold War liberals. Cold War liberals. They're good at being Democrats. John Kerry's been in Congress for how long? In John Kerry's career, you remember it started, he was a Vietnam War protester, right? Little known fact. Well, not little known fact, but this is a little known fact, but John Kerry was a Vietnam veteran. He fought in Vietnam. He came back from Vietnam. And when John Kerry came back from Vietnam, he became the leader of Vietnam Veterans Against the War, VVAW. Little known fact is that John Kerry was kicked out of VVAW after about a year, and the Vietnam Veterans Against the War was taken over by the Revolutionary Union or the Revolutionary Communist Party. The Bobavakian people, the Maoists, actually took over the VVAW. Most of the people that were in the VVAW with John Kerry, eventually became like Maoist communists, which is kind of amusing. But yeah, John Kerry was never a Maoist communist, but the group that he started eventually moved in that direction. VVAW, Vietnam Veterans Against the War. But John Kerry is just kind of your old school New England liberal, basically. And that's, he's a corrupt politician. He's very boring, as people say, right? I'm John Kerry. Oh, yes, I am John Kerry. I'm so boring. And he's married to Teresa Heinz Kerry, from the Heinz ketchup, right? One of the people that's making money amid the food price gouge that's going on, the food inflation, right? Troy C says he's Skull and Bones. He's from the Yale Skull and Bones Society. That's John Kerry. But yeah, John Kerry, he's not one of these permanent revolution Hillary Clinton State Department fanatics. He's more of an old school Cold War liberal. He's lame. He'll negotiate with the neocons when he needs to. He's boring, but there you go. That's John Kerry. And will the USA get its ass handed to it over Taiwan? Again, do you see, like all the Zoomers, do you know anyone who's like 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, 22? Do you know any of those people? All right. Do you know any of them? Now, in your mind, picture the 19, 20-year-old, 22-year-olds that getting drafted and sent to go fight against Russia or China. Picture that in your mind. Now, do you think that do you see this happening? I'm not trying to insult those kids, by the way, right? I'm not trying to say they're bad people, but do you see this happening? Do you see, I mean, look, I want to build an organization that helps these younger people, get unbrainwashed from social media, that helps them, get the pessimism and the hopelessness that comes out of their cell phones and comes out of their laptop computers, to kind of, purge it from their body, purge it from their mind, help them be optimistic, physically fit, disciplined, you know what I'm saying? I would very, very much like to help these younger folks. But if this next generation, if the Zoomer generation, they've got problems. It's not a good time to be a young person. And it's not a good time to be a young person, but the way they've been affected, the way the toxicity of our society has affected them, it has affected them in a way that wouldn't make them very good soldiers. Let me just put it that way. So I have a hard time believing that they're going to draft, all these young people to go fight a war with Russia or China. That said, green card soldiers, and this is part of the Roman Empire, right? The Roman Empire, it fell when they couldn't even fight their own wars. But there you go. And that said, I love these younger people. I really do. I care about them. Thank God. One thing I thank God for every day is that there was no social media when I was in high school. There was a little bit. There was MySpace. I didn't have a MySpace in high school, but a couple people did, right? And there was something called MySpace. That was it. There was no social media when I was in high school, right? I can't imagine what it must be like to be a high school student with people making fun of your classmates, making fun of you on TikTok or filming you in embarrassing situations and sending it around. I mean, I couldn't even imagine. I couldn't even imagine how bad it must be to be a young person. And then I also thank goodness that I'm not a young person now during this pandemic. I hated being in my parents' house when I was a kid. I hated it. I felt cooped up in my parents' house. I felt frustrated. I felt bored. Could you imagine what it would be like to have a pandemic living in your parents' house? Must be an utter nightmare. So I love these kids. If you're 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, 24, I just want to give you a big hug. I want to give you a big hug and tell you that I care about you and that you have a hard life. You have a really hard time, and I sympathize with you deeply. And I hope that with the Center for Political Innovation, we can develop mechanisms, workshops, exercises that can help you gain confidence, that can help you get unbrainwashed from the pessimism of our society, help you develop strength, and help you become heroic and find the heroism within yourself. That's what the goal of the Center for Political Innovation is, or one of the goals, right? Ultimately, it's a socialist think tank. This is one goal for the John Brown Volunteers. I would like to develop a crew of young people who find their inner strength as they become socialist revolutionaries, right? That in order to battle against the powers that be without, in order to fight the Wall Street monopolists and war makers and big bankers, you have to fight a war within yourself as well. The battle without depends on the battle within. And we are all waging a battle within. There is a battle within that we have to wage. And I would like to develop mechanisms to help people more effectively wage the battle within. So, that is one of my hope. And so, I guess, for a minute there, it sounded like I might be insulting younger folks. I'm not doing that. But I am saying that I have a hard time seeing these younger folks as the kind of people that would go off and fight and die in a war. So, that makes me think that Biden may be really stupid here. It may be that, Biden's, forcing Russia into a game of chicken. And when that game of chicken happens, he loses. And I mean, I really hope that we can pull back from the danger of war, because this is not a good situation. So, oh boy, Keaton Mansfield called you a boomer. I'm definitely not a boomer. My parents are boomers. Okay, I'm not a boomer. All right, I'm a millennial. I'm close. I'm on the cusp, though. I'm close to being a Gen Xer, but I'm not. I'm a millennial. Was born in 1987. So there you go. But that's funny though. That's funny. But anyway, all right. Well, folks, it's been a great stream. I'm glad I jumped on here and did this stream tonight. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. The people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night.